Have you ever wanted to create your own sounds from scratch like this? But you have no idea where to start. Well, in this video, we are going to address that. I'm going to cover Synthesis 101 with you so that you can learn to create these kind of sounds. Yes, I know fundamentals, principles, basics are boring, but they are super important and you need to know them in order to be able to make these kind of patches. So first off, I'm going to be using Serum for this demonstration, but really you can use any synthesizer. They often have these 4 core elements: oscillators, envelopes, filters, and modulations. So what are they? Oscillators, they are the thing that make the sound. Envelopes, they shape the sound, particularly the amplitude envelope. Without them, you would just have this happening. That's just an oscillator on its own. It gets annoying, right? So we use the envelope to describe how the sound will change over time. Filters, they allow us to shape the sound even further by changing the frequency. The main ones here are low pass, high pass, and band pass. And if you don't know how to visualize this, think of an EQ. An EQ is a series of filters. And the final is modulations. With modulations, imagine you've got an extra pair of hands changing the dial for you. Okay, let's jump into Logic and have a look at these in a bit more detail. And as I said, you can use any synth here, but we're going to focus on Serum. It's got quite a nice GUI, which makes it a bit easier to understand with what's going on. So let's first look at the oscillators. So you've got 2 here, and you'll often have at least 2. You've also got a sub oscillator, which often, again, many synths have, and then you've got a noise oscillator. Sometimes the noise will also be incorporated into oscillator A or B, but here you've got a separate one. So the first thing to know about oscillators are you have many different shapes. So looking at all these, there's loads, but the common ones, if we go to the basic shapes, are the following. You've got a sine wave. It's a very clear, pure tone. And in fact, let me bring up a spectrum analyzer so we can visualize the sound that we're creating. So if I just play a note with a sine wave, you'll notice there's only one frequency there, a single frequency, and that's because a sine wave is the most pure, it's the purest form of waveform you can have. It's literally just one frequency, the fundamental frequency. Very nice for subs, it's got a weight to it. If I play it down here. So next one, if I move the wavetable, so next one, we've got a sawtooth wave here. And you'll notice there's a lot more frequencies here. So that's why it's a lot brighter. It's a lot more rich, you could say, because there's a lot more harmonics. Look at all of those. The next basic shape is the triangle. So there's not as many harmonics there as the sawtooth wave, but this also works quite nice for sub because it gives you a bit more mid-range. So that will cut through a mix a little bit better than a sine wave because you've got more of this middle stuff. Phones or tablets or whatever, they might not reproduce anything below 100 Hertz particularly well. So it helps to have some representation in those middle frequencies. So that's the triangle wave. Fourth most basic wave shape is a square. Rich sound like the sawtooth wave. And the difference is the order of the harmonics. So those are the 4 basic shapes. So oscillators, you've got wave shapes. Next thing you need to know about is pitch. Everything needs to have pitch. So you can either do it in Serum, and many synthesizers, you can do it either by semitones, or you can do it by fine tuning or coarse tuning. So incremental frequency changes rather than stepped note changes. And that's the coarse tune. So yeah, you've got pitch, and all oscillators will have this pitch. They'll have different shapes you can choose from. And then the other thing is level, really. The level allows you to choose the volume. So they'll often have a unison control as well, which is different voices of the same pitch note. So imagine having 3 people singing the same note at the same time, and that's what you get. And you'll notice there's a detuning happening. But if I turn it down, it just makes it a bit thicker. And that's what unison does. It adds an extra layer, if you like, of the same pitch note. You got your waves, you got your pitch, and you got your volume. So that's oscillators. And you can often have 2 of these, or you can also have often sub ones, which are normally a sine wave. But in Serum, you can have many different ones. And then a noise oscillator, so like white noise, that kind of thing. Now, the next important sound to know is about envelopes. So on an envelope, that's going to control how the sound changes over time. It's got these 4 main controls. Most synthesizers have 4: attack, decay, sustain, release. Sometimes they'll have hold as well, but this is also called the ADSR. The attack is the first one, and that's how long it takes for the sound to get up to maximum loudness. So a fast attack, it's It's pretty much instantaneous when I press the keyboard. A slow attack. You'll notice that it takes a while to fade up. So when it does fade up to its maximum, it can then decay. So that's how long it takes for the sound to reach the next one, which is going to be the sustain. And that's a volume rather than a time. So the sustain level, let's say put that about halfway, and you'll now see the decay and sustain in action. So attack's going to be quick. That was the decay you were hearing there, how long it gets down to this sustain point. And until I let go of the key, it's going to stay at that level on that point. So then the last one is release, and then that's going to be how long it takes for the sound to completely die down once I let go of the key. So let go, and there you go. See, it took a while. So here's a very clear ADSR shape. So as you can hear, this will control how the sound is over time. And that's envelopes, really. They're very simple, but they're very important. So if you want something very pad-like, you know, more evolving and long and dreamy, you might do something like this. But if you want something like a lead sound, you might have it a lot shorter, a lot pluckier, a lot attackier. Get rid of that release a bit. And that's a lot more choppy. Okay, so that was envelopes. Now let's move on to filters. So we'll turn that on over here, and you can choose whether you want it on A or B, or the noise or the sub. So filters, they shape the sound again, just like the envelopes do, but the filter is more based on frequency content rather than the amplitude of the sound. There's three main types of filter. There's a low pass, a band pass, and a high pass. So each describing the different frequencies within a sound. There's your high pass. There's your low pass. Here is your band pass. And the number, the 12, often refers to the slope, so how steep these slopes are going to be. A higher number, like 48, would be a steeper slope, and that's basically decibels per octave. So we can choose our shape. A low pass is very common, especially in electronic music. So low pass, 12. Do you hear the difference? So a cutoff very high is going to let a lot more higher frequencies through, but if I put it down here, nothing's going to get through until I open that filter up. And you can see here, as I increase the cutoff, you'll get more frequencies coming through. So that's what a filter does. It allows certain frequencies through or not. And the main control, as you might have guessed, is the cutoff. This chooses the point at which frequency it's going to start cutting out those frequencies. And there's another one that's important to know, and that's the resonance. And you see when I'm increasing that, it's creating this little peak here. It's like a compensation for that dialing down, for that fading off. What happens if you have a high resonance is it's going to ring out a little bit. And that's when you get that kind of acidy sound from a high resonance. So if you're thinking about resonance, it's also the ringing, and that's going to depend on where the cutoff is as well. So they kind of work together as a team. And the final one to think about when you're talking about filters is the drive. And you can drive a filter, you can make it a bit more aggressive, add a bit of distortion often just by pulling this up. So that's a lot more driven, a lot more distorted. So that's quite cool features of filters. And those are the main controls when it comes to filters. So the final thing we want to talk about here is modulations. You can't really talk about them without talking about LFOs. What is an LFO? An LFO is a low frequency oscillator. What that is basically a pulse that isn't audible, but it can affect other parameters in a synthesizer. For instance, if I was to do this on the cutoff, now I could do that manually like I just did, or I could set up a modulation to do that for me. So if I take this LFO here, you have to assign it to somewhere. So in Serum, you just drag and drop it onto the cutoff. You'll see that blue part now, it's going to modulate that area of the cutoff. I press the key and it's automatically doing that for me. It's modulating the cutoff. Obviously, you've heard that 100 times in bass music when you want a wobbly kind of bass, which is awesome. And what you can often do with the LFO is change the shape. So you can make it more of a ramp, more of a triangle. You can make it into a sine wave or a square wave. So you can usually change those around. And a big thing to know about is the rate. That's how fast that oscillation will happen. So rate, very important with the LFO, and you can assign these to many different parameters, anything you want. So you've got LFOs, and they are going to continue oscillating round and round, but you can also use an envelope as a modulator as well. So if I come to envelope 3 here, I can use this shape. I'm just going to make something up. Say I wanted this shape to control, I don't know, let's say the pitch. I could drag this up to the course tune. And did you hear how that kind of shifted? I'll do it with a higher note. And you heard that pitch rising and falling as per the envelope. So unlike the oscillator, it doesn't keep going round and round and round. It just plays that shape out like the amplitude envelope would. But we've assigned it just to the pitch. So that's when you might use an envelope rather than an LFO. And if you come to this section, all synths will have something like this, and this is the modulation matrix. It just shows you which source you've assigned to which destination or target. So we did the LFO1 to the filter cutoff. We did the envelope 3 to the course pitch. Here's the amount as well, how much the LFO is going to affect the cutoff. But one other thing to know about here is this type. So they've got directions. So you can have something that's bipolar or unipolar. And if it's unipolar, it's just going to go one way. But if it's bipolar, it's going to go backwards and forwards. So that is modulation matrices and modulations. And quite a lot of synths as well, they'll often have an effects section. So you could add some reverb, maybe some phaser. There's a few global controls you might want to know about as well. Often synths will have some global controls. So things like portamento or porter or slide, and that will slide between two notes. You can hear this kind of like a glide effect. The other thing you might see is the amount of polyphony. So that's just how many notes you can press at once. It will allow you to conserve CPU if you need to. And that is pretty much all the main controls, I would say, for synthesizers. And if I open up Logic Synthesizer, you'll see that the similar controls apply, so just in a different layout. If I go to Retro Synth here, you'll see the same kind of thing. So we've got shapes, the wave shape here, shape 1 and shape 2, that's for two different ones. You've got the filter section. So you've got cutoff here, that's what this is showing, cutoff, and then resonance there. You've got some amp envelopes down here, we went over that. And you've got some effects in this section, flanger, chorus, glide, LFO here, and an envelope that you can use as a modulation. So you'll see that many synths all have the same characteristics, they're just laid out differently. So that is the basics of synthesis. So now I suggest you run off and apply these to your own tracks. Have a go, play around, see what happens. And if you want to understand a bit more, then let me know. I'll make some videos on more intermediate and advanced sound design. And if you like this video, because YouTube is really smart, it's probably suggesting that you watch this video of mine as well. I'll see you on another video. Take care. That's a bit like Blade Runner 2049. But I was actually trying to do noisier.